Well, hello. Welcome to the Citybiz audience. Thanks for joining us here today. It is my distinct honor and privilege to have an opportunity to have a conversation with Chrissy Thornton. Chrissy is the CEO and president of Associated Black Charities. Welcome, Chrissy.
Hi, thank you for having me today. So excited.
Yes, it's so excited to have you here. For the Citybiz audience who may not know, share with us briefly what Associated Black Charities even is and what do you do in the role as CEO?
So this is a great question. As I was navigating my journey as a candidate, I too was trying to figure out what Associated Black Charities did, what they've done throughout the 38 years they've existed, and also how they needed to show up in the new iteration of leadership, starting in 2023. And I must tell you, it was hard to determine exactly what the organization did. Over the years, over many different periods of administrations and leadership, the organization has done a whole lot of things. I don't know that we've been as successful as we should have been in communicating those things publicly. And so what it came down to for me is that ABC has always been a racial equity organization. It was established in the 80s by faith community leaders, by Black businessmen and Black businesswomen who noted that there were deficits in the Black community being supported, specifically here in Baltimore, Maryland. And since that time, the organization sought to stand in the gap on pressing issues that were keeping Black people in Black communities from being able to thrive, being able to be successful, and being able to really live their best lives and have opportunities that we saw our counterparts having. And so for me, looking at that, it is exactly what ABC has always been. Maybe not always been the best at articulating, but exactly who we should be now. Right now, we're a racial equity organization concerned with all of the ways that systemic racism has impacted the lives of Black people, Black families, and Black communities. And for us, at the forefront of those issues are the racial wealth gap, which I love to talk about, workplace discrimination, housing, education, access to education, health equity and health access, as well as our criminal justice system and our ability to participate in the democracy of this country.
Wow. Well, two things. Understanding that those are actually very huge buckets of things that Associated Black Charities has stood in the gap for. However, since the 1980s, I'm certain that there have been shifts and changes and ebbs and flows and a resurgence of DEI in the forefront nationally. So given all of the ways that things can change over time, what changes are taking place now in the organization with you in the leadership role?
As I've heard it, ABC has changed and shifted with each person who sat in this seat. I think that's a little bit unfortunate because there should never be a whole lot of mission shift just with leadership changes. Unfortunately, I find myself also making a number of changes just because I found them to be necessary. I will say that the organization has had four, with me included, very impactful and accomplished leaders in the seat who I think at the time have responded to the needs in Baltimore, in Maryland, in the country, and have shifted the focus of our work to address those immediate needs. You know, it becomes a proposition of, yes, all of these issues and barriers and obstacles affect Black people, but what's the pressing need today? So I will say that over the past, I say 15 or 16 years, we almost singularly focused as an organization on the racial wealth gap. We focus on economic empowerment for Black people, Black workers, Black community, with the understanding that as Black people obtained and attain the ability to improve their lives economically, that would then in turn economically improve our city, our state, and our country, you know, as residual impact to that improvement. And so I think that focus has been necessary. I think it continues to be necessary. And as I step into the leadership role in January of 2023, I have continued to see the need to push that forward, but also to not leave behind some of the other pressing issues in our community. Because I think as we, as people, attempt to establish wealth, build Black wealth, establish the ability to participate in the ecosystem of being investors and entrepreneurs and business owners. I think as we push forward in being able to leave financial legacies for our children's children, it's also important that today we have a certain quality of life that allows us to live in neighborhoods that are thriving and safe, that allows us to seek healthcare treatment and support in environments that aren't disinclusive, that allows us to seek education and advancement in these other arenas while we are also at the same time building our opportunity to have increased economic achievement. And so that's what we go back to. It's not new to ABC. It's new to 2023, but this is the kind of structural transformative work that ABC has been involved in and committed to since 1985. And I'm so proud to be a part of that.
So I wanted to ask you, when you talk about the economic, the racial wealth gap and things like that, one thing for certain is that racial equity affects Black people regardless of where they fall on the economic spectrum. So I want to ask you, why is racial equity at the forefront of issues for Black America still today?
I think it's important. When you talked about maybe a shift in the landscape a few years ago at the heels of George Floyd being murdered, the landscape of DEI, grew larger and emerged as a hot button topic and, something that all organizations made a quick shift, some better than others, to start to address. DEI for me is not specific enough. DEI is expansive and broad. Racial equity specifically refers to and talks about the ways that people of color, are marginalized and disenfranchised due to race. And I think as we focus on racial equity, we will begin to support and help all of the communities that, then are helped after that with our expansive DEI work. But after George Floyd, DEI became the hot button topic. A lot of organizations delved into putting something in place. Some of them didn't resource that work well enough. And so some of that work has started to be rolled back. Some of that work has started to be de-invested in. But we haven't seen the progress in the promise of that work in the 2 to 3 years since that tragedy happened. And so now more than ever, it's important for people, companies, organizations, community leaders, government officials to double down on the need for equity for all people. And in my, focus area, equity for Black people. Because a lot of that work was done performatively and we don't see the progress. Maryland continues to have an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap, and the racial wealth gap in the United States is now 10-to-1. Where is the promise of the progress? So we may have programs in place, but it's essentially important now more than ever that those programs become in position to be evaluated. What is the quantitative result of these efforts that were put in place? How are Black people thriving? How are Black people now considered as part of the fabric of people included in the American dream? If that has not shifted in the past 2 to 3 years, we certainly have more work to do. And this is essential for Black America to be focused on pushing this narrative forward, I believe.
So when you mentioned that it's performative, it has been performative in many, I absolutely agree with that, as DEI became sort of like the fancy girlfriend, so to speak, at a certain time in our country. And so I look at that and ask you, I think a study just came out that said that corporations that decided to pour into DEI 3 years later have mentioned that only like less than 10%, maybe even 4% of their resources were actually utilized, right? So what could an organization like Associated Black Charities do for corporations to stand in the gap to support actually turning a performative thing into something that is substantive and impactful?
One of the reasons I say it was performative is that even despite people's best intentions, this work has to be resourced. And so there has to be financial investment into sustaining this work. Many corporations with great intentions started out okay. Some of them might have put up a diversity statement on their website. They may have even gone so far as to hire a chief diversity officer or someone to work in that position. But without financial resources to sustain those positions and those people in those places to focus on this work, it will not progress. Without true transformative work that starts at the top of organizations. Plenty of organizations want to do this work, but if the leadership of those organizations are not completely invested, completely committed, and also willing to tell the truth about their own disinclusion, their own practices that have kept Black people out of their, ecosystems, out of their hiring practices, out of their promotional practices, out of thriving in their organizations, then this work can't move forward. ABC is focused on being an entity that offers racial equity training for corporations. We also do executive coaching. I have clients now where I'm doing racial sensitivity coaching to help leaders specifically start to step into rehabilitation. It has taken generations, centuries, to build up this structural racism that has impacted people of color in so many ways. It cannot be dismantled in 2 years. It cannot be dismantled in 10 years. It will take a sustained effort that is resourced and has the commitment of these organizations to see a fraction of change that will begin to benefit people in real time. And so ABC has some things in place. Prior to me being here, the organization established something called the 10 Essential Questions. It's a great resource and tool to be used in corporations, in nonprofit organizations, in community work, in policy development, to determine whether or not what you have in place really does move the needle on equity, inclusion, belonging, and or does it not? And so we have those tools and resources. We're also creating customized toolkits, DEI toolkits, as well as creating evaluation and assessment tools for organizations who have put their toe in the water on this work, but now need a tool to assess whether or not it has been effective, whether or not the objectives are starting to be achieved. Because if there are no measurements to goals on this work, then it is absolutely performative.
Thank you for that. I want to pivot for a second because what I know is that there's always the Baltimore of it all. And as someone who has lived all of your adult life, I believe, here in the city of Baltimore, greater Baltimore, and so you learn a city and its feel and its culture and its people. And then in this new role here in Baltimore, how does it change your lens? And if so, how do you see Baltimore today?
That's an interesting question. Someone introduced me just last week and said to the person they were introducing me to, please meet Chrissy. She just moved to Baltimore to take on this role at Associated Black Charities. And I had to giggle and laugh. It's been such a focus of or a talking point as to whether or not I'm from Baltimore. And I understand. Baltimore is that city where people want to know where you went to high school. It is very close-knit in that there's a belief system, which has a lot of validity to it, that you had to have navigated through your childhood and adolescence to really understand the inner workings of the city. What I will say is you are correct. I moved to Baltimore when I was 17 years old in September of 1993. Okay, it's now 2023. That's 30 years. I'm now 47 years old. So 30 years I've been in Baltimore. I moved here to attend Morgan State University, which I might add, Morgan State University in the 90s, having survived, some of the culture and climate that was there then, I hope to have a little bit of Baltimore adjacent cred just from that. But what I will say on top of that is that I have I get a little bit for that. I have worked and toiled in Baltimore, and my career trajectory has not been what some people may have assumed it is. When people see you in roles like this, you're the president and CEO, they assume that it's been a straight and narrow path to that seat. It has not. Very early on, I started my career, number one, working in psychiatric adult day centers in Baltimore. Okay. I can't begin to tell you the amount of interface I've had with just people, members of the community at all levels of socioeconomic status, at all levels of achievement, that has really shaped my opinion of Baltimore, its potential and its possibilities. One of my earliest employment opportunities was working with the Baltimore ARC. At that time, we called it BARC. The Associated for Retarded Citizens is the acronym. I don't believe they use that name anymore. Back in the late 90s, I was a job coach for them. And my assignment was working for their landscaping department and actually on a contract for Maryland's MTA, where I had my own route. My route was Mondamin all the way downtown to Lexington Market. And in the morning with the clients that I supervised where I was teaching job skills, we cleaned those transit stations, literally out in Baltimore, in the city every day. So I cleaned Penn North. I cleaned Upton. I cleaned Lexington Market with a group of, at that time they called them consumers, clients now, where I drove a truck and taught them these life and job skills. So for me, hearing that I'm not from Baltimore sounds off because I've been here for all of my adult life. And I've done some of the things that people may not know I've done in, around, and within the city. I've, been involved as a community leader. I've been involved in civic work and volunteerism in the city. And I've actually worked in several of the most prominent health advocacy causes here in Baltimore. So my lens as still an outsider, which I'm okay with, they call me a transplant, right? As a transplant, is that Baltimore has promise, potential, and Baltimore is such a city weaved together, knit together of people from all walks of life, all walks of capacity and achievement, all walks of experience. And it's why people like me come to Baltimore. People like me who are from New York pick up their lives and come to Baltimore, come to college and never leave and stay in Baltimore. It's that promise and potential that we believe in as strongly as people who went to City and Poly and Mervo and Emerson and Dunbar and all these other places, because if we didn't believe in it, we wouldn't be here. We would not be here. We're here because we believe in it. So when I look at Baltimore, I consider myself a New Yorker through and through, right? There's that pride too, but I'm also a Baltimorean in the fact that I'm here. I feel that I've contributed to the city. I want to contribute more. And in this role, this gives me such a vantage point and a seat to do so much more. And I stand ready and committed to do that. And my prayer is that Baltimore benefits from me being here, because if not, I have not done what I should do being here in this city.
Wow. Thank you for that. What are some of...
I'm sorry. I was so sensitive. I want to be from Baltimore too sometimes. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask, what do you think ABC's biggest needs are at this time?
I think we need an opportunity. So this is a big period of transformation and transition for this organization. We had a capable leader in the seat for 16 years who has done so much for Baltimore, so much, not just through ABC, but, was known for caring and pushing the needle forward on a lot of these causes. And in that, now there's a shift. And it's not just a leadership shift. We've completely restructured operationally. We've completely changed a lot of our mission focus as we're no longer a grantor. We're no longer someone that's acting as a fiscal sponsor for large grants and granting money to smaller organizations. We are literally transitioning and transforming and contouring ourselves to the needs of Black people as communicated to us in Baltimore primarily, and then hopefully statewide and beyond that. What we need now is opportunity to communicate what we're doing, to gain buy-in, to gain trust. We need opportunity to pursue partnerships that have been long-standing for ABC, but also new and vibrant partnerships and collaborations where ABC maybe has not maximized that potential in the past. Opportunity will allow us to do our mission work in a way that's supported, that is resourced, and that ultimately will maintain the trust of this organization and the legacy of this organization that's been here for 40 years.
Are there any specific challenges right now to meeting those needs? What are your challenges that you're coming up against right now?
Several. I will say, transition is hard. Transition nowhere is easy. But as far as imminent challenges, probably any nonprofit leader would sit on this interview and tell you that funding is always going to be a challenge. If that leader is a leader of color, it's going to be more of a challenge. If it's a leader of color who's leading an organization of color, okay, now the challenges are just, piling up to a point of being, sometimes what it feels like is insurmountable. And that's unfortunate. Baltimore has a generous financial funding landscape. There are foundations here. There are philanthropists here. There are people who care so much about giving back, and the opportunity is there. My challenge and as I'm sure any leader of color of an organization of color would tell you, is that there's a need for development and equity in those opportunities. And Black organizations that are Black led or Black integrated, as I'm starting to delineate the difference between those two, tend to be the most underfunded, under-resourced, under-supported organizations that exist. And so it takes us 50 years longer to do what our counterparts do. It takes us 10 times more effort, energy, and time to get the work done because we don't have the capacity and resources to get it done. And what we really need is for the funding landscape to really look at, specifically now that there's so much diversity funding, where that diversity funding is going. Is it cycling through the same hands of the same organizations? Or are we extending it to organizations like an Associated Black Charities who are looking at innovative solutions, but also have entree into those communities? We're not showing up as strangers to the Black community. We are members of the Black community. We are integrated into the Black community. Their needs don't represent 5% of our work. Their needs represent 100% of our work day in and day out. And so it's a challenge to have to compete with some of the better resourced, higher capacity having organizations that dedicate 5% of their time to Black causes, but get the most and the highest levels of support, trust, and collaboration. And so I say that's a challenge. It's not my challenge alone. I would say that's for any organization that shows up like an ABC.
Wow. So as you think about that, and think about all of the goals, all of the challenges, I should say, I guess we're about 6 months into your first year. Have you had any 1-year goals that you are aiming towards that you feel are tangible? And also, what about 3 to 5 year goals?
I presented some goals as part of my candidacy. And one thing about the process, which I think was vigorous, it was a vigorous process, right? Is that I've stayed very true to what I presented because I believe that's why I was entrusted with this opportunity, because what I presented was valuable. And so I have not deviated from what I put forward, meaning that we looked at what are the possibilities. So I asked the questions about what if. What if ABC became the nation's voice on equity? Is that a possibility? What if ABC launched an Equity in Action conference where we became educators of corporations and the Black worker, educators of corporations who want to increase their footprint in DEI, belonging, racial equity, and educators of the Black community in helping them to navigate structural racism in a way that we know it's not going to be eliminated in our lifetimes. So we feel that we have a responsibility to help these workers navigate these systems and structures that are in place that are keeping them from being successful. Can we be the presenters of a conference like that would serve those dual purposes? Can we become known for more than just our ABC Gala, which everyone loves and is excited about? And I can't wait. Listen, I am so excited about June 10th and ABC and Drew Hill and the celebration of our community organizations. But at the end of the day, it's just a fraction of why ABC exists. Can we become known by our programmatic initiatives, which include buckets on education, support, resources, advocacy, and engagement of our community? Can ABC become integrated in the Black community like it once was in the 80s, in the 90s, in the early 2000s, where we're actively listening to Black people, where we're not sitting around a sterile table and environment and making decisions for what the community needs without them and without their input? Can we partner with the community? Can ABC become a collaborator? Can we cross-culturally collaborate for learning experiences and opportunity and to expand our capacity? Can we partner with the Jewish community and bring healing to the relationships between Black people and Jewish people in Baltimore in particular? Can we partner with the Catholic community? Can we partner with the Latinx community? Can we partner with the queer community? Have we left members of the Black community behind because we've been so singularly focused on one demographic of Black person that we've left out the Black queer community, that we've left out the Black aging community, that we've left out the Black disabled community? So these, when I look at what are my 1-year goals, what are my 3 to 5 year goals, these are the questions that I asked, what if? And these are the things and goals that I am actively on a daily basis working toward accomplishing now.
Wow. And I have one last question, and you led me right into it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I have heard you talk about partnership quite a bit and collaboration quite a bit. And I wanted to ask you, why is collaboration with places like the Catholic community, the Jewish community, with other organizations, with corporations, why is collaboration such a big part of your leadership strategy? And how do you see it being used to support ABC's overall goals?
So I look at collaboration from two different directions. I first believe there can be an improvement in collaboration within the Black community and within Black organizations that are doing racial equity work. The landscape is vast, and over the past 3 years in COVID, there are, yes, longstanding organizations that exist to do this work. There are also organizations that I call pop-ups. They've popped up in the past 2 to 3 years with innovative and exciting approaches to this work. Specifically here in Baltimore, how many of us are doing that in silo? How many of us are doing that without any knowledge or consideration for what one another are doing? Are we identifying areas of duplication? Are we identifying areas of potential partnership? Are we identifying areas of shared resources? Our resources are slim. So as we begin to start to dissect them into smaller efforts in silo, we start to eradicate our ability to do more at the pace we want to do it in. So where are the opportunities for collaboration, number one, within organizations who are committed to this similar work? And then let's look externally. I think it is and would completely be a misstep to not look at partnering with other communities, other cultures, and other organizations, specifically where we can stand strong together against hatred. That is a common denominator. That does not mean, however, that I'm willing to water down ABC's message of racial equity and racism against Black people. See, the difference is I can stand in that and still collaborate. I can stand in that and still see brotherhood and sisterhood with other communities. I don't have to dilute my messaging in order to capitalize on potential partnerships with people who want to help me. The other thing is, because of my unique background, having built my career in white spaces, having come from the Bronx, New York, but being raised for the most part in the Mid-Hudson Valley, where I grew up with, I could go weeks and not see another Black person until I came to Baltimore. I have this ability to navigate different spaces in a way that I think will bring power and will bring, I think, the ability to achieve more. And I say that because when I look at an entity like the Associated and what they've accomplished over 100 years, ABC can stand to learn from that. Okay? They can also stand to learn from us, in some of the ways that we're standing up for inclusion and equity and these things. So why not work together? When I look at an organization that they have now a head count of 7, with the ability to bring more people on, but still limited capacity to do this work at the pace we need to do it and to have true impact for Black people, I have to partner with organizations and people who have privilege. That means me looking for allyship, right? Because if Black people had the power, the position, and the authority to eradicate racism, girl, racism would have been eradicated and eliminated a long time ago. We don't have the privilege, we don't have the resources, and we don't have the authority to do it alone. We can lead the way, but we need allyship and partnership. So I would be remiss to sit in this role and not recognize that and not lean on the resources, the capacity, and even in some cases, the mentorship of other organizations that can help us achieve our mission goals. I will not throw the baby away with the bath water. We have work to do, and anyone on God's green earth that is willing to help us push this mission work forward, we're going to look to and lock arms with and help Black people live better, be able to be better, be able to have opportunities so that my children won't have to work on these issues the same way that I've had to, and their children won't have to work as hard as they've had to. That's super important to me.
Well, that was a perfect note to end on. It was very enlightening to have this conversation with you, Chrissy. I want to thank the Citybiz community and audience for joining us for this, and thank Citybiz for having these opportunities to have conversations with people who are leading and driving Baltimore. Thank you so much for being here, Chrissy Thornton from Associated Black Charities.
Okay.